What is up, watch fam? I am Christian, the curator of the Theo and Harris Watch Shop, and today I'm going to be reviewing one of your collections from AP and Rolex to JLC and IWC. Really great stuff. Let's get into it. Boom, watch fam. All right, before we get into this beautiful collection, a quick wristwatch check. I am wearing a late 1990s Rolex Daytona in yellow gold. This is powered by the famous and collectible Zenith movement. Of course, the movement itself was based on Zenith's El Primero, but Rolex altered it, in classic Rolex fashion. Lovely watch, great proportions, 40 millimeters, 18 karat yellow gold, white dial. I've been wearing this watch constantly, and for you guys out there that know me, you know that I don't really wear sports watches all that regularly. I'm more of a dress watch guy, but bam, that is so good. All right, so let's get into this collection. So we do these types of videos every now and then. I'm so lucky that as owning this company, I am in constant contact and dialogue with so many wonderful watch geeks out there of all over the world, of all different races, creeds, and cultures. It's fantastic. I found myself in the last 5 years friends with people that are living in Dubai, people who are living in Africa, people who are living in Texas. It's just super cool. So this collection was submitted by OM, who is a watch aficionado and fan of Theo and Harris, and I want to read you the introduction to his watch collection before we get into the watches themselves, which I'm sure you're going to love. So let's do it. I'm an American living in London, England, as a marketing director in the energy sector. I've always been a fan of smaller, more vintage-inspired watches. I've tried my best to have watches that are somewhat understated, my Royal Oak being the exception. My thought currently is that my next watch should be a vintage piece, and probably gold, as I don't yet have either in the collection. Given your expertise, I'm confident that you'll be able to point me in the right direction. Thank you for sending this in, and yes, I definitely have some great recommendations for you. So let's get into what already has. So his first watch is really the first watch of many people who are lucky enough to start off so well. Omega Speedmaster. You really can't beat it. Introduced in 1957 by Omega, originally as a racing watch. It went to the moon. Ultimately, Omega has been able to not only achieve this tremendous feat in watchmaking and in history, not to mention design, they've been able to capitalize on that history so well. Bought a very traditional example here. It was his first real watch, as I mentioned. It was in celebration of his undergraduate degree, which was in aerospace engineering, which is very apropos. This is a tritium version from 1996, and as pointed out, and I agree with him, it's aged super well over the years. Many of you guys out there know that because Omega has been producing the Speedmaster for so long, there are so many examples out there, different references, different variations, and maybe I'm crazy, I'd love your thoughts on this. I have found that even the most common kind of run-of-the-mill Speedmasters, meaning not necessarily collectible in any way. Now, keeping in mind that there are so many Omega Speedmasters that are hyper collectible, but even the entry-level Speedmasters, they're just wonderful watches with great proportions and history and character, as you can tell here. So I do recommend these watches to so many people as their first watch. Just a month or two ago, when a cousin of mine called and asked for a watch recommendation, his first watch, a watch that could be versatile, it could be sporty, it could be rich, a watch that had history, it took 2 seconds to arrive at the Omega Speedmaster. So I completely understand why you did it. I would have done the same in many ways. So you're off to a good start. The next watch he has here is a Jaeger-Lecoultre Reverso Tribute to 1931. I don't own a Reverso, and every time I end up talking about one, that frustrates me. I'm actually very jealous of this watch. This is one of his favorite watches. It's one of my favorite watches, and it definitely lays the groundwork that here likes, refinement. This is an incredibly rich and classy piece. Now, while the Reverso was introduced in 1931 as a sports watch for polo players, in that in its flipping mechanism, you would conceal the comparably delicate crystal. In today's context, it's still a gentleman's watch. It's a dress watch. It's versatile on a calf strap, but if you're wearing one, you probably have an affinity for, elegance. What really stuck out to Ohm here, and this is something I've never even thought about really before, but it'll stick with me, is that this particular watch resonated with him so much, and I'll read what he wrote here. I bought this watch during a very interesting time in my life. I was moving from the USA to England and wanted a watch to commemorate the occasion. With my ethnicity being Indian, the Reverso to me was the perfect blend of Indian and English heritage. I can't say enough about the Reverso. This watch will be in my collection until I die. While today we look at this watch as an elegant watch, and it certainly is, its inception is actually, quite different and telling of kind of history and style. In the late 1920s, actually in India, after a polo match, a couple of the gentlemen realized their watches had been damaged from all of the rough play. So what if they were to have a watch that could protect itself from all of the rough play and all of the shock and all of the, the damage that could be inflicted through the match? So JLC had the idea, the Reverso, a watch that would reverse itself and conceal all of its delicate parts. So absolutely, and Ohm is right. While many of us know that the history of the Reverso does go back to India, it's really not something that's talked about very often. So I'm so glad this resonates with him so well. 1931 is fantastic. If you guys are out there are looking for a dress watch, think about Cartier's Tank, think about the Reverso, kind of at the historical kind of pinnacle. Two wonderful watches. Okay, next watch, classic piece. Many of you out there own it. Rolex Submariner, reference 14060. This is a watch that Ohm had dreamt of for so long as a child, as so many of the rest of us have as well. And that's the problem with the Submariner, right? Everybody, I don't mean that literally, but everybody has one. If you go to a watch meetup, you'll find dozens of them, all basically mass-produced and the same. But it's not a testament to, being a sheep. It's a testament to the relevance of the brand, to the quality of the product. I completely understand why it holds a place in your collection. It holds a place in some of the best collections in the world for exactly those reasons. It's not a watch that he wears during the week, but it's something that he finds himself gravitating toward on the weekends, right? Which is really very traditional Submariner, the kind of watch that is a beater, not a watch that you coddle, but more of a weekend warrior. Of course, most of us aren't actually diving anymore. But what's funny about the Sub is because the watch has become so synonymous with luxury, so many people are afraid to actually wear it rough and tough. And I don't blame them at all. I'd feel the same way if I owned one of these modern Subs. Now, Ohm is open down the road to trading this in for a vintage Submariner, maybe a 5513 or a 1680, and that's a bridge that I would be happy to help him cross as that day comes. But for now, let's move on to the next watch. The next watch is an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, reference 15450. This is absolutely not a watch that Ohm had ever anticipated owning. This is a watch that he had associated with people that were more maybe gaudy or bombastic than he is, which is true. And it's actually something that Anna spoke about just last week in respect to Hublot. But AP played a big part in the kind of Hublot movement, the movement toward larger, more gaudy watches. And of course, the Offshore was the big AP watch that kind of captained that that generation. But that element certainly did creep its way into the Royal Oak line. The Royal Oak in many ways became far less elegant from Genta's original design. But this particular reference with its gray, almost taupe kind of color dial really spoke to him. I can completely see why. Case size is fantastic at 37 millimeters. It's a piece that I could absolutely see on my own wrist, and what makes it so much more special is that Ohm bought this watch to commemorate the birth of his firstborn child, which he will one day, pass this watch down to that child. So that's really beautiful. I mean, I'm certainly not rushing into having a firstborn child, but that will be a really cool moment, as it is for so many people out there. There are two more watches before we get to my recommendation for his precious metal dress piece. The first one is something that so many watch geeks out there really are envious of, wish they could have, and that is this. Jaeger-Lecoultre Geophysic 1958. This is a watch that is so sought after. The Geophysic is a historical piece of JLC history, but it was one that had been I wouldn't say, ignore, but it wasn't present in the JLC line for so long. And when it was reintroduced a couple of years ago, the world pretty much exploded. The details of the watch, from the hands and the dial to the lume plots, even the case, while conservative, is really well balanced and beautiful. Everything about this watch is so, traditional JLC. It was not a reissue of the originals, but it was a piece of that very rich history. And what made Ohm pull the trigger on this is really fantastic. He was in engineering and product development before he started his new career, and he spent so much time in labs. So when he began to, explore the world of watches, what better way to commemorate that part of your life than with an anti-magnetic watch. Of course, you can go Milgauss, which may have been a little bit more of a common choice. Milgausses are great watches, but Geophysic is, for me, definitely the choice. Again, just a little bit more of a not just formal, but really traditionally professional piece. Great watch. I'm jealous of that one. And his last watch is this piece, and it's a great story. This is IWC's Spitfire UTC. This is his most recent piece. It's not a piece that he had ever intended on acquiring, but Ohm, like so many of us, was absolutely fed up with the Rolex waiting list. He had been on the waiting list for a GMT for so long. A GMT was a complication that he really held close to his heart. He travels over 100,000 miles a year and has friends and family in all different time zones. So of course it is useful, and there's a connection there too. So after being fed up, he explored other options and landed on this piece. A really well-executed IWC with the GMT at 6 o'clock. It is in some ways similar to the Geophysic in its fundamental, design, structure, and elements, but it's sportier. I really admire the dial, and Ohm has made it clear that he's really enjoyed picking up pieces from different brands, which is something that's very important to him and to so many of you, not focusing just on one brand, but to explore, to maybe stick within a certain kind of style and profile, but, finding out what do the other manufacturers and philosophies and systems have to offer. Of course, there was a bit of redundancy with JLC, although the Geophysic and the Reverso 1931 don't really overlap. Still, I really like that philosophy. And it's that philosophy that will inform, my recommendation for his next piece, his first precious metal dress watch. Now, as many of you guys know out there, there are some fantastic options from some of the existing brands in this collection. JLC, again, to be redundant, manufactures some beautiful dress watches. For example, their Master Control Ultra Thin with the small seconds, a lovely watch, but let's move away from that brand. We can go into Patek and get a Calatrava. You can go into Vacheron and even do a new watch like the Traditionnel, which I believe is a little bit more beautiful in their patrimony. It has a little bit more character in its design. Or you can go vintage and find yourself something that is completely unique, right? Something that is not reminiscent of the 1950s and 60s, but from that era. Vintage Vacheron did such a great job with guilloche dials and different patterns. But I'd really love to push you in this way. You like to taste different brands, but how about this time you try a different country? You taste an entirely new culture. Lange. Lange & Söhne is a revered German manufacturer, a manufacturer that I hold very close to my heart. The history of the brand is absolutely incredible. We actually did a video that we'll preview right here up top. I highly recommend you go watch it. It's a story of conflict. It's a story of triumph, resurrection. It's a story of doing honor by your family. It's a story really of being brand new into a field and making everyone else look a fool. So whether you go with a Lange 1, which is maybe their most iconic and classic watch, or you go with something that's more simple, like their Saxonia or their 1815, I think that you'll find the language of the brand really impactful. Proportions of the cases, the weight of them, the German silver movements, the hand-engraved balance cocks, everything about Lange & Söhne is, in my opinion, one, lovely, and two, so uniquely them. You'll be blown away. I highly recommend it. Ohm, thank you so much for sending in your collection for review. Everybody, if you enjoyed this collection review, please like the video and subscribe to our channel at Theo and Harris.